All right, I'd like to call this May work session of Louisa County Planning Commission to order. We'll begin with new business. Ordinance changes for electric transmission facilities and proposed amendment to the county comprehensive plan. Mr. Kuhn.
I was going to say, you've got it in your agenda packet, and stand ready to answer any questions.
We looked at this last time, a brief presentation. Does anyone have any questions or want to discuss anything on either of these since they go together as a piece? More or less. Two separate actions, but
This has been reviewed by our internal counsel as well as outside counsel that we've retained to assist with at least one project. So it has been vetted and it's ready to move forward. Or it's their opinion that it was ready to move forward, unless you all have some amendments you'd like to make.
legally it's ready to move forward. We can do that. Any questions? Very well. Well, we do have it as, both of these as public hearing tonight, so we'll move on with them there. And if you think of something between now and then, we can pick it up then. But I had not come up with anything myself, and I think we kind of talked through this last time, so we can move on from there then. Next up on new business would be campground definition. So, Mr. Kuhn, is that you or is that Ms. Buckler?
Ms. Buckler will come up too. So I just for clarification, this is something that we had taken to the Board of Supervisors. We've gotten more interest throughout the community in opening campgrounds. Ultimately, the intent for campground is to use it as a campground for transient visitors to come in, enjoy the lake or rural areas. But what we're starting to see is more individuals are wanting to use it as temporary housing. Allow people to come stay on the campers as temporary housing on different properties. That's something that is coming up, and we brought it up to the board, and the board wanted to send it to you all to have the discussion. And Ms. Buckler has worked on some updates to the definitions to coincide with more of the intent that we felt that was originally adopted several years ago when we had the campground.
So the directive came from the board at the April 6th board meeting, just for the Planning Commission to look at the definition of a campground. And what we have here in your packet is based on discussions that we had internally with county administration, legal, and the community development department. These are not specific directives from the board. These are just staff proposals. We were asked to look at some surrounding localities. We reached out to Albemarle, Culpeper, Flavanna, Goochland, Green, Orange, and Spotsylvania. And so we looked at what they had as far as their regulations, what came out of our internal discussions with staff, and so that is what we've drafted here. Again, by no means is this a directive of this language from the board, but it's a starting place for the Planning Commission to look at these items and see if they want to make changes or have questions about what we've drafted so far.
All right. Mr. Quarles.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe, Mr. Kuhn, we're attempting to look at what this means. And then it comes up as far as temporary housing. What is temporary housing? What's the definition there?
So instead of someone coming and staying for a week or 2 weeks, they're doing it for 6 months, 8 months, something like that.
Do we have
And
a cap on that?
So that's part of the conversation that we wanted to have. It's
Okay.
before you.
Yeah, that's temporary housing is kind of vague because you got to figure out what that means.
But that's part of the conversation is because if originally when campground was approved and considered, it was something that was supposed to be for transient visitors coming up, using a campground for a week, maybe two during summertime, springtime, something like that. But now it is shifting to people that are coming here, working in the area and staying for months at a time.
Yeah.
And that's not really the intent of what the campground definition was. So that's where, we wanted to have the conversation and see, just like you said, do we want to set a limit? Is it, X days per month, X days per year, something like that, just to better address the intent, or is it something that we feel is okay?
I'd be concerned about that number, and then also how we enforce that. How is that enforced? So those are my concerns. Thank you.
I'm going to follow up on a little bit on this question I had. One of the proposals is to limit stays to no more than 60 days in a 12-month period. Was that intended to be, just so I understand what the proposal is, was that intended to be a rolling 12-month period, or is that an annual, like, January to December? Had there been much thought given as to which that was, or just trying to just say 60 days and a year is about all we're looking for?
Either one. I mean, honestly, that would probably be fine. Just the intent there is if you had somebody that 1 week every month, or they come up a couple days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, every week from the end of May till the end of September or something like that. We want to give people that are using it for the intended purpose their option to continue to do that. But I mean, like you said, if you wanted to do July to June 30, follow the fiscal year, any 12-month period, or do calendar year, I don't think any of those would be.
So if you just kept the phrase in a 12-month period, it could be looked at from an enforcement standpoint.
Or it'd probably be more of a rolling 12-month period, where if you wanted it to be a calendar year, you would amend it to 60 days in a calendar year.
Right.
So,
Okay. Yeah, I think, honestly, I think either one would serve the same purpose in what you're trying to accomplish there, but, okay. To a point.
I would like to elaborate if I could, sir.
Yeah, yes, Mr. Payne.
Mr. Coon, Ms. Buckler, I just look at this, and I guess my view of it might be totally skewed here. And I see it as campground. And when I see the word campground, and I use them quite often, very regularly, and that implies a recreational use in my mind. I'm going here for a purpose of R&R. And I think in our community, what we've done, we brought a huge workforce into our community that we all live with on a daily basis. At this point, there's lots of places in our community where there are trailers and RVs and campers. I guess campers and RVs would be the better, where my mind's at. So we brought this to our neighborhood. These people come here every day, where they travel from Fredericksburg, Richmond, Charlottesville. They're coming through our community every day. And I feel like when I hear this as campground, this is not what this workforce needs. And I made just jotted some notes while these gentlemen were talking. In my mind, it's more of a workforce housing issue that we have, not so much a campground, a leisure activity. And when I see this as I see it, this doesn't work for that, because we know that some of these are like 10-year plus build-outs that we've brought into our community. So I think we need to really look and understand how we put this together, that we don't, and I say this because these people are going to come here every day. They're just going to drive through our community. I really think a lot of this, as it's written and as I see it, is recreation. And I don't know how to get out of it. I'm hoping somebody can help me understand a little bit better. The temporary accommodations, if you're saying 2 months, and I talked to a gentleman that's doing the fiber He's like on a 5-year contract, pushing fiber all through the county. We pass him all day, every day. He's been staying at the Best Western Designs for 2 years. He's now getting ready to buy a house because he's looking at the economics of it. I guess I just see this differently. We need to. Maybe there needs to be two things. Maybe there needs to be a campground thing. It needs to be a workforce.
I would agree with that. I think if that is the appetite of Planning Commission, that if we want to address campground, just like you said, for the R&R, the recreational type uses, we can tighten those definitions. But I do think on the back of that, it would be advantageous for us to have some kind of workforce housing, temporary in nature, something that would be potentially a little bit, it's different than a campground, but right now, just today, with what we have in our zoning code, the closest thing is a campground. So if we want to have those two different options, I don't think that's a bad idea. I just think if that's a direction, and I don't know what definition we want to call it, if it is workforce housing, temporary housing, something along those lines, that if we want to do something like that, that I think it'd be good to coincide the campgrounds as well as that, just so that when applicants come to apply, if they want the fiber individuals or the build outs, those people come in and stay in for a significant period, they know I'm going to be applying for X, and if I want RVs to come and stay for a week at a time for the lake, that's going to be the campground. So we have a clear separation of which one is which. So however you guys want to do that, we'd be happy to work on bringing that definition.
Okay, go ahead.
And it brings to mind from my own personal experiences in my youth was work in North Anna and Surrey and several other places. And those outages then were 4 to 6 months. They were much longer than they are now. So when you went somewhere, that's what you did. You found a place such as that, and a lot of my peers at the time used not RVs, but a camper. A camper that you typically see at a campground. So that's why it kind of comes to mind for me. And again, North Anna's not going anywhere. And when the build-out's done, that'll be done. And I'm not saying that somebody that's going to come into town and say build a Wendy's in 3 or 4 months would be able to utilize that. It might not be something they would use. But I think with the workforce we have in our community, it would benefit us to have a means to support them. And I guess really more than anything, support them that puts us in the proper guidelines for the VDH side of it. It's the health side of it that really catches more than anything. Where are we putting these at? That we can have some idea and control.
No, that's an excellent point, and that's also part of the campground is that VDH only requires the standards once you have 3 or more. So some of these people are wanting to use 2 campers or campgrounds, and then they don't have proper septic facilities, whatever. But just like you said, if it's a requirement that they can go through, get a CUP for whichever they want, VDH may have different standards. We've got, there's electrical standards for bringing electric boxes that they can hook up to, and water, wastewater, all that, we want to make sure they account for, do it right, and it's safe. But I don't think that'd be a bad idea if we handle the campgrounds and also have some type of workforce housing. So we can at least work on definitions and standards of what that may look like. It may be a little bit higher requirements levels than a campground, just because if people are going to be staying there for a lot longer than a week or two, if it's going to be several months or things, you may want to add some additional standards, but we'll look at options.
Ms. Barlow.
He's exactly right. My question before he laid it out was, how does this impact the people doing outages and stuff like that at North Anna? And that's been going on ever since North Anna was built on a pretty regular basis. What I remember from the board, we were talking about campgrounds and sent that to the planning commission, but did it have to do with workforce housing for outages, or was it strictly talking about campgrounds?
Right now, that's what it is there's a lot of interest in people opening campgrounds that when they articulate what they want to use it for and why, it doesn't meet the intent of a campground. It's something more like a workforce housing. So that's why we wanted to make sure we differentiated and made sure if campground is going to be something that we wanted to utilize and allow long-term residency, let's make sure we amend the definitions and everything to account for that. But honestly, having a second definition that clearly splits it, it would probably be a better solution than.
Well, we sent it to the planning commission, like I say, there was an interest, so we just sent it to you all to hear it out. But, I mean, for 50 years, we've been doing workforce housing and stuff like that and been, dealing with it. So now, and we're certainly, I think we need to have something that works to accommodate that. In other words, these people got to stay somewhere. And they've been renting places on people's private farms and everything else to stay at. So I don't think we want to restrict that, but by the same token, I wasn't clear what direction you were going in with this campground thing. I'm like, if you're talking about camping space, the normal thought for a campground, that's one thing, but if you're looking at a place for people to stay to work outages and something, that may be something completely different. And I didn't have a clarification on that myself.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Quarles?
My concern, one of my concerns is that we, in trying to rein this in, like Mr. Barlow said, you could potentially affect a situation that we've been dealing with for a long time. And the positives of it. The negatives of it, some of it, could be that we're seeing an increasing amount of trailers or campers that show up in people's yards that are detached from their house, that run electric cords over and make other accommodations for other people. And I think that's not the intent.
Yeah, and that's where I think if we better define what the campground is, and then, like Mr. Painting was talking about, better define what workforce housing was, and we can set standards so that if someone starts doing that, that'd be a violation, but they would have a clear avenue. If they come to get a CUP, they would just state the intent of who they would like to stay on the property and what the tentative time frame that they expect it to be was, and then we would be able to tell them, okay, you're either going to want a campground or you're going to want workforce housing, and they go through the CUP process, and anybody outside of that would allow us to be able to address that pretty easily through the enforcement, because if they don't have a CUP, they shouldn't be running drop cords and water hoses to recreational vehicles, unless it's, they're just getting ready for a trip or something.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Quarles?
And then it becomes an issue as to how many bites of the apple do we get. Because obviously if I apply for Mr. Kersey to be there, and then I apply for, the next one to be there.
Well, you wouldn't apply per RV or camper. It would be for the property to have that use on site.
So then they'd be able to do that.
Up to 5 RVs or something like that, whatever they wanted, and then the planning commission and board would review it and approve it, and then they'd have to go through those standards. But it wouldn't have to be the same people.
But how do we stop the single unit going out there?
If they don't have a CUP,
Okay.
they're in violation.
So they'd have to have a certain number of campers to qualify?
Yeah, same way a CUP that comes in and says we're gonna have no more than X units. I mean, we do that even with planned unit developments. If they say we want to have 114 residential units, if they submit a site plan, it's got 118, We tell them, no, this is in violation of your CUP, you only get 114. So, I mean,
So-
we deal with that every day.
So let me understand you correctly. So if I apply for 4, but I only have 1, I mean,
That's fine.
well, that kind of defeats that purpose, doesn't it?
No, because you could get 3 tomorrow that want to come and rent it, and you'd be able to rent it to them. You'd still have to do all the standards and whatever well or septic improvements, electrical improvements that would be required for that CUP. So the property would be approved through the CUP to do it, and then as long as the standards are there for the infrastructure, you'd have the capacity there. So, I mean, you would be able to have 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever the cap would be, or just you couldn't have any more than that.
So they'd have separate drain fields, is that the idea?
The VDH has a completely different standard for what's required. I'd have to pull up their
No,
standard
I'm not asking you that right now, but the idea is that they wouldn't be tapping into the existing house.
No.
Drain field.
No, VDH has a different standard. If you're gonna do a campground, which is 3 or more campers, it's not like a shared drain field, but it kinda is like a shared drain field. They've got different standards for these things.
So
that we would,
the additional units would be sharing a drain field, but not the,
the home.
okay.
So they'd have to have space for it, and all the infrastructure would have to be in place to at least be able to handle whatever number they came to us and said they wanted 5, they wanted 10, whatever was deemed appropriate. There's different levels of infrastructure that they would need. But once they have the infrastructure, if they had, let's say 10 is the cap, if they had 2 people renting or 9 people renting, that's not a violation because they still have additional capacity there. It would just be somebody that has no CUP, no infrastructure, and a trailer pulls up and they run drop cords and hoses. That's not something that would be allowed.
No,
So
understand, my issue was not so much the idea of under, but I'm just worried about the situation where somebody decides that they just want to rent their trailer out and they apply for a campground, and then the next thing you know, it's just for the intent of the grandson who wants to, use my RV out there in the back, and
well, I mean, that's going to be what planning commission and the board would have to determine through the CUP process.
Right.
That if we require a certain level of infrastructure being installed for these uses, I'm not sure that someone's going to want to spend that kind of money for the infrastructure that'd be necessary for one person to live. in a
understand, thank you.
So I had a question in looking through it, and this is just to understand, as you all were putting this together, what you were thinking on these different things. And that had to do with the zonings that you were approving, saying we could do this with a CUP, and the zonings where we're not gonna allow this. So how did you all select the zonings, the commercial C1, C2 and with growth overlay and resort development, but set all the rest of them aside? What was the thinking in that?
That was based on discussions, like I said, that we had internally between community development, administration, and legal, and that seemed to be the consensus of that group of about 6 or 7 people, that they wanted to see campgrounds in the commercial areas and that sort of thing, and not throughout the county and the agricultural or residential areas. But like I said, these are just drafts, they're not, it was just a place to start.
No, that's fine, that's fine. I'm just trying to get a sense of all these things. Yeah. So, I guess, then do we need to, if we were to do separate campground and workforce housing, then I guess there would be 2 separate ordinances, and you all would draft us some language for workforce housing.
That's what I've got here as a note. We'll need to add a definition for workforce housing and add standards.
So for workforce housing, and I'm just gonna look up and down the row here, I mean, how do we feel about this? Would workforce housing be a more regular stick-built kind of home or manufactured home, or would it be still allow a travel trailer, camper, RV, that kind of thing. I mean, what's the thought? Todd?
I think you hit it well. We have so much of that in our county, and affordable housing is not as predominant as it used to be many years ago. So for these workers to find some type of valuable residence that they can depend on for short term, you know, I do believe it is in the county's best interest to look out for them and our workforce in that way, whether that's in one form of a campground or another, as long as we're doing proper checks and balances. Maybe also with the building department, electrical code changed so much last year, you know, making sure the building department's incorporated in this so they can verify these connections. But it's a really good topic. I mean, it's a large amount of staff in this county that participates in this workforce, and you know, this opened up my eyes a little bit to it of how vast that number is today, especially with the projects this county has in progress, coming, whatnot. It's a lot of work. So, and I think my biggest concerns were the VDH requirements and making sure that our building department is tied into this somehow. So, you know, we're ensuring safety of the workforce and the homes on the properties that this would exist, as far as drain fields and so forth. But
I would certainly agree. And I really think I'm a licensed contractor, installer for drain fields. So what the VDH comes out with, and some of the things they kind of put out there, you know, when you have it on paper, because it all starts with an engineer that tells you what kind of soil you have. So what you end up from that point, you know, some are more expensive than others, just because of the design of it. I think that would be more than anything the largest controlling factor of anything that a person would decide to do, because of the expense of that. The rest of it, all these RVs and travel trailers are UL listed. They're designed for a purpose, and I think on the code side, it would fall under the proper wiring, the proper depth, the proper conduit, the proper pedestal that you hook to, a 50 amp, a 30 amp, a 110 type thing. So that part I don't find so concerning, and I think that even possibly as someone that wants to do this would get into it more, it's in my mind, it can be quite expensive to start from scratch. I think and I traveled, and I've done it, and I actually have a family member that still does it. Nuclear, and he's nuclear his entire career, and that's what he does. He travels with a travel trailer from one place to another. Of course, there's shorter terms now than they once were, but with the workforce we have in our community now, it would make sense to look at doing something to benefit them and us. I mean, they're on our roads, they're traveling, they're coming to these data centers in North Anna, regardless of where they live at. They're coming there every day. So it would make sense to make it more accommodating all the way around.
So I've got just a couple more questions to follow up, and I'm gonna go back to the camping side for just a moment, because one of the things that struck me about a campground being only in commercial is let's say I suddenly became rich, I don't know, but I wanted to buy 700-800 acres of land in Louisa County if I could even find it anymore, but I was able to do that. And I wanted to have camping for, there's a nice stream running through or something. I wanted to be able to provide for hiking and fishing and that sort of thing. And I wanted to have a campground so people could come. And of course, the leisure activity is hiking trails, maybe horseback riding trails, maybe fishing, that kind of thing. But I'm out, I mean, this is big land. I'm out in agriculture district, and now it seems like there ought to be a way to work into that, because I don't know what you would do you know, if you had that vision, if we completely X everything out, you kind of walk in and say, I don't really know what to do here, how to provide for that sort of thing.
I mean, in that scenario, they would just have to rezone it. If what is presented before you, they would just need to rezone it to one of the commercial zone properties, and then that would be one that I think would be pretty quick deliberation for everybody, but that's just how it would need to occur. So unfortunately, it's, you know,
Yeah.
it would help smooth out some of the process, just with the number of A1 and A2 properties there are out there, that I think you're going to see a lot of people interested in doing this. There are a lot of people interested in doing this. So that's part of where the conversation is, and I think we do need to make sure we account for it when we look at the workforce housing aspect, that the workforce housing may be in different zoning districts than what the campgrounds are,
Yeah.
but we definitely can have more conversations about that.
So following, and I got 3 questions here, and they kind of build on each other just to kind of get to a full understanding. So the next thing would be, do we have sufficient C1 and C2 in the county right now to do this sort of thing? Or are we setting up for some large-scale rezoning? I'm
I
just,
mean, it depends. The people that are interested in doing it right now are in A1 and A2,
yeah,
but if this was ratcheted down to C1, C2, there may be some individuals sitting on that property that would be willing to do that. But just right now, as of today, if I could answer it, most of the properties that are coming to us asking for campground or asking information around workforce housing or something, they're not C1 and C2. It's the A1 and A2 right now.
so we'd be either restricting the amount of housing we could do, or we'd be setting up for large-scale rezoning.
Potentially.
So the final question, I think it's good to have a separate discussion about campgrounds and workforce housing. But in the end, when you look at the requirements for each one of them, it looks to me like awfully much the same thing, except maybe in a campground you can have a tent, you know. But I mean, the rest of it sounds like pretty much the same kind of thing when you're setting it up.
Some of the infrastructure may be to a higher standard, just because of more long-term use. Instead of a week at a time, it may be longer, so there may be some additional infrastructure we would want to consider. You know, that's, yeah, I mean, because when you really think about it, if it's commercial entrances or gravel entrances versus, you know, the electrical, the well and septic and how they're delivering that, any additional, you know, is there going to be buffers, vegetative buffers surrounding each campsite or the whole campsite? Or so, you know, when you start going down the list of what you would want to change, I think we could come up with some delineation. I don't think it'd be substantially different, but I do think if the intent is to live in travel trailers and campers for 3, 6, 9, 2 years, or stay there for a week, you might have some different requirements there.
Would you envision, and maybe, and I think it's, again, this was all prepared for campground only, and we're talking about
Everything.
breaking this apart. So, I mean, would you envision someone being able to have a campground where folks could, because it's popular to do, when people buy travel trailers, they'll park it somewhere, and they'll go visit on the weekends or things like that. Would that still be a campground kind of thing? Because then you start to blur the lines. How do you do enforcement on somebody who's really living there full-time, but I mean,
That would have to come up during the CUP process, that if they wanted to have 10% of the spaces allowed for long-term storage for usage just like that, they come up on the weekends during the summer and all that, that we would want to make sure that it was addressed during that process. I think as long as that's done in advance, I don't think it should be an issue where, you know, if they just decide to do it on their own without it being expressly passed and approved, then, you know, we may have to have some communications and get it worked out.
All right. Well, and I didn't follow up on one thing, and that was my dream 500 acres that I'm, you know, got this little campground that people can come in and do hunting and fishing or hiking and fishing or whatever. If I were to do a rezoning on that to get into campground here, would I be able to rezone only that portion that's used as a campground?
I'd have to check. It would probably be cleaner to subdivide and rezone, but you may still be able to rezone. But yeah, I'd have to check with the new laws on being able to do that.
Just kind of curious, yeah.
Yeah, 'cause I mean, I know like you can get a CUP on part of the property, not the whole thing, but when it comes to rezoning,
Yeah.
I don't know how that would, I'd have to check on that.
How we could do split zoning now. We've got split zoning. in the
Yeah,
county,
but that was
whether or not
like-
we want to continue on with
Yeah,
that.
and that was
exactly.
how it was done in the past, and it's been in effect, but I don't know if we can, I have to double check that.
All right. That takes care of me.
I have one more comment. And then to go off of what Chairman Disway said, the kind of opposite, so a gentleman comes here and works for the week, and then say he lives 90, 100 miles from here, so it would make sense for him to come here, stay here during the work week, and then leave his trailer right where it's at, go home for the weekend, come back. So kind of opposite of what you were saying, where they're come for the weekend, you know, so it sits there all week and come for the weekend. But either way they want to do it, it's there. I really see this looking totally different than a campground. I picture campground, walking trails, go off what Chairman said, walking trails, scenic woodlines, the playgrounds for children's, I added a pool, fire pits. I wouldn't see that at a workforce campground, for lack of better words. And I see this as two totally different things that really at the end kind of marry up to be really close to the same thing. And I think the biggest part is that there is a control on the waste aspect of the campground. That's the biggest part for me, is that we have some semblance of control, the waste of it, and it's not just in a pole in somebody's field or pasture.
All right. Well, I guess what we'll do, you all can continue to review the campground. If there's any edits or changes you think that we should make, we will definitely address them. And we will plan to come back next month with some workforce housing or other definitions that may be appropriate. And we'll add a definition, standards, and matrix. And our intent is we'll probably expect to use travel trailers as kind of what would be utilizing this temporary housing, at least for right now. But I mean, we can look at other localities and see what else they offer. They may offer some, you know, modular units on permanent foundations or something like that as well, that we'll look up and see if there's alternatives that meet the intent.
All right. Any other things?
When we check into that, can we check and see if any of the other localities require buffers on these when they do that?
I would almost say that would be an absolute non-starter for me on a CUP. It would have to be secluded that nobody else could see it, in my mind. So that would be a very strong buffer. I mean, and I don't mean to clear it, plant it, and then we plant a row of pines. I would want a buffer that no neighbor would have to see.
Why don't we just go and look at successful buffers instead of, if other localities do it, we'll just say the expectation is going to be there's going to be buffers included, and we'll try and look at what would be best for this.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Dickerson.
originally Commissioner Quarles brought up the enforcement aspect. I'm not sure we covered that thoroughly. Would this be like our short-term rentals where it's by complaint driven, or people actually going out from the county looking for issues to enforce?
I'm not going to be able to answer that question until we get this fully vetted out, unfortunately. I mean, if it's a CUP process, it probably wouldn't be a by right with restrictions, like we did with short-term rentals. It'd probably be an actual CUP. So normally they're a little bit easier because we just pull up the CUP in hand, or code enforcement would have the CUP in hand with the conditions that are required. And if it's not to that standard, but until we have everything vetted out, I'm not going to be able to answer how we would enforce it.
All right.
Follow
Mr. Quarles?
up on Chairman Dickerson's question. I hear what you're saying as far as that goes, but what initiates? Whether it's complaint-based or whether or not the county is going to actively go out and look at these CUPs that you have?
It would be what's in the ordinance. So if we required an annual check every year for code enforcement to go out there and check the property to verify everything's up to standard, then it's not going to be complaint-based. If we don't have those types of things in the ordinance, then it more than likely would be complaint-based. So it's just, depending on how we want to do it, it could change how it was enforced.
Yeah.
I'd like to add on to what Mr. Corliss has suggested. I would, at the minimum, an annual visit by code enforcement. And I say that because of damaged equipment and, you know, backed into pedestals, electric out of whack. That safety aspect of it, I think, would certainly have to, and I would, that'd be a minimum requirement to me.
Very good. Any other comments? All right. Well, thank you all for the initial proposal and for taking this further, and as we refine it and produce something a little bit better with it.
Let me
Yeah.
add one thing.
Mr. Quarles, please.
You know, with this issue, obviously, there's going to be some sensitivity with it. But do you think, as it goes along, and I know it's in the infant stages, but when it goes along, do you think we should form like a committee that maybe of not only just staff drawing this together, but and not only the planning commission, but maybe some input from local citizens or whatever? Do you think that would be an idea of how to form and shape this thing?
Well, what questions are you trying to get asked and answered?
No, when you're talking about putting this whole thing together. So tonight we've come up with dividing the recreational aspect of it to the workforce setup. Before we come in with a hard and fast thing, do you think we could put together a committee of different inputs to kind of mold and shape this? I mean, how does that look? I mean, obviously, it's too early right now because we're just now putting this together, but we're putting ideas together.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Kersey.
just in listening, I mean, I've dealt with people's mail over the years, and these workforce folks, they've been residing in the campgrounds in the county for years. So you may want to talk to people that are running these campgrounds. They're already doing both. They're recreating and they're working out of these campgrounds. So it's not necessary that we reinvent the wheel. It may be worthwhile to have some engaging conversation with them to find out what they have been doing, what works, what hasn't, before we venture too far. I think Mr. Quarles has a very good idea here, because the information certainly is out there.
Thank you. Input from, that would be folks like Small Country or those kind of things, Christopher Ron, yeah. Those sorts of things, yeah. Would that be something that we would, Mr. Quarles, would you like to work with
Sure, I could do that.
with staff and pulling all that together.
Sure, let me know.
Very good. Would anyone else like to work with Mr. Quarles and staff on that?
I hope that, Mr. Coles.
Very good. So Mr. Painting would like to help as well. And between you all and contacts with local campgrounds, sounds like we can get some good information together.
We'll do our best.
Very good, thank you. All right. And I guess we can move on to the next item, which is the zoning methods for reducing growth.
Can I take off on that one for a few minutes? I'd like to explain for those watching and others that may not understand why we're introducing this or what led us to this point. You know, this is part of a complementary plan that the board and that the county has done an amazing job of the past decade or more in bringing this. This ties together what the data centers bring to the county. This is preserving our rural character. This ties together the county surveys that our citizens have taken. You know, it's a direct reflection on our growth, which affects our schools, 75% plus of our budget. It's fire and EMS. It's all of our county needs, from being the third fastest growing county in the state for years. So, you know, this is not the most attractive part of the county's plan, but these zoning changes have to happen in order for us to be a good complement to what the board has done as a whole and the direction of our county. So at the last board meeting before, when we lowered our taxes 15%, you know, they were clear. That's step one in the direction that we're going. This is step 1, too, in zoning. We have many steps coming behind this, such as PDR, TDR programs, growth areas, and stuff to talk about. But what we have to put on the table first is these topics, and it's focusing on A1, A2 in our rural areas. You know, what we're able to do with our agriculture, with all these AFDs forming, what we're at 36,000-ish acres in the county now, with recent applications and more tonight. Our citizens are doing an amazing job of saying, we want to preserve the rural character. You know, we're voluntarily doing all these things, and it's not something we have in effect now, but as we looking towards our future, and incentivizing these programs are something we're going to look forward to come. We've got to also complement them with zonings and slow down the A1s and A2s in our rural area. So what we're here to talk about is not growth areas tonight. It's not TDRs, PDRs yet. That will follow suit next. This is step 1, and it's just A1, 2s, and how our county is chewed up in so many different ways. Now, we have steps that we put in here, zoning changes, that we put in there for the reasons of looking at it from multiple points of view. You know, minimum acreage is going to be something that's talked about big. We put it in there the way we put it in there that Chris is going to explain, but we're able to look at what a 15-acre parcel can do from a forestry standpoint. We're able to look at what a 10-acre parcel can do from an ag standpoint. It is to begin the right conversations to the topics that do what our comp plan says we are supposed to do, and slow growth, preserve rural character. So it can be a lot to take in, because this is a substantial change to the county, but it is to complement the direction that we're going. Now, we did use Lancaster as a roadmap, because Lancaster has done an amazing job in Pennsylvania at everything there is to do about their county, the way they've focused growth, the way they've preserved. Or Louisa, we're a little bit different because our footprint was already established. We're behind the 8 ball in them, in a sense. So how do we preserve what we have and slow that strictly in A1s and A2s? A1s and A2s are our topic for this format. We've done our work groups together. We've had lots of discussions. We've received counsel, which I'd also like to suggest we receive legal counsel with what we're going through tonight and some of these topics to make sure that we meet new state code. Please help behind us. But during this, I don't want the citizens to feel like we're just taking from them. You know, we're giving tax benefits. The board has had just an amazing plan to complement its citizens with this growth. And if it seems as if we're taking away, we're coming around the corner with a way to give that back. You know, I just ask for people to be patient, hear this thing out in its entirety, and see it as its big picture. So, with that being said, Chris, Mr. Kuhn, roll on with this, and as we go through, we can talk about how we came up with some of these topics, what they affect, what they do, and so forth.
Absolutely. So what you all have in front of you today is slowing residential growth, layered approach to Louisa County. That's what we're ultimately going to talk about, but if you'll indulge me for just a little bit, what I wanted to do is make sure we went back and where this started and where the board had recommended we send slowing residential growth to Planning Commission, kind of why we got here. So of course, one of the things we've got is we've been one of the fastest growing counties in the Commonwealth. If you look at what the census estimate is as of 2024, we were at 42,000 people. And based on the anticipated growth there, we could be at 47,600 by 2030. And I know we're already have surpassed, I think it's 43,000 in estimates now. So we're, halfway through 26 and we already have another 1,000 people on here. So what we looked at, and I know Supervisor Barlow has got some issues with this, but what we looked at is the total parcels without a dwelling in Louisa County, and right now it's 9,347. Some of those are landlocked, some of those are not going to be developed. However, what we did not account for is we did not account for divisions that could occur and happen by right. So what our hope is, if you take the lots that are landlocked, can't be developed, you take the lots that can be divided and have the road frontage, you're going to end up with something relatively close to this. Even if we plus or minus 10%, we're still at 8,000, 9,000 parcels that could be developed in Louisa County. So when we look at that, where is it located? Inside the growth areas, there's about 25, almost 2,600 parcels that don't have a dwelling right now. So it's only 27%, where the 73%, 3/4 of them are located outside of the growth area. With that, that's where we've got, A1, A2, 987 parcels are inside the growth area, where almost 5,800 are outside the growth area. And then R1, R2, you can see it's almost an even split. Inside the growth area, it's 1,500. Outside, it's only 1,000. So one of the big reasons why we started this whole concept is where we're at right now. On average, the average home in Louisa County costs about $4,800 in service costs when you add sheriff's office, fire EMS, schools, general administration, landfill, and parks and recreation. And that's not everything, that's just what those services cost. The average annual tax revenue for those homes is about $3,900, so that deficit is $856. Right now, Louisa County, we average about 33 new homes a month. So we average about 430 homes a year. With the recent board reduction in the personal property tax rate, which I know the residents appreciate, but that delta has now risen to about $1,000. It's about $20, $978, $980. So what you're looking at is at 430 homes a year, that means there's a budget deficit of about $430,000 going to happen year over year, as well as when you account for inflation. As you can see here, if all existing capacity is built out, the total operating cost is going to increase by $44.5 million, and total revenue generated would only be $36.5 million. Now it would actually be less than that. So that structural deficit would end up being about $8 million a year. But one thing this does not also account for is the new schools, the new fire stations, the new capital investments that are necessary. So when you start adding $50 million schools, as well as those operating costs, a new fire station that may be $15-20 million with apparatus. All those things start adding to where the service cost per home is going to continue to escalate. And if the county, as well as the board, I know, want to maintain our low tax rate, that deficit is going to continue to grow. So what can we do to make sure that our growth is in line with this? This is where we're going to talk about it today. So what you have before you, we've got why this approach is needed, which essentially just articulates what I said, and then what this strategy does. So effectively, our goal in this is to minimize land consumption, keep farmlands viable and usable, and discourage speculative or short-term subdivision activities. And when we look at everything we're about to talk about, I just kind of broke down the steps. So what you have before you is step one, we're fixing the way land is divided in A1 and A2 out of a growth area. Step two, we're aligning everything and letting the changes start to take effect. Step three, we're offering the preservation tools. Step four, it's to refine the growth areas if needed. And then step five, we want to track and make incremental improvements as we move on. And then the major themes that I want you all to just take into consideration as we go through these is ultimately we want to slow residential growth in a responsible way. We want to preserve the rural nature of Louisa County. We want to ensure growth does not outpace infrastructure or services. We want to provide more options for working lands, and then we want to support housing availability and affordability over time. So what I'm going to do is I'll make it work. So what I want to show here in this image, this is in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So if you see on the bottom row, you can see the homes that are down there. Right now, all these lots below are about half-acre lots. There's 15 of them. I do think there's 2 lots on the right side that it looks like different homes purchased 2 lots. So they've got an acre, not the last home on the right, but the 2 in the center. Can you also? Oh. All right, I'm going to walk around. I've got a big error message on the screen. So what we're looking at is, as Mr. Hicks mentioned, we're looking at increasing the minimum road frontage to 450 feet. So what that would do in this image is I've measured out what 450 feet would look like. So instead of having 15 housing lots like they had, it would end up being 5 housing lots. And of course, what that does is that helps maintain the rural nature. You don't have a mailbox every couple feet. I know that's a complaint we get on a regular basis when homes start popping up. This is something that right now the average, if you look at an A1, the average feet between mailboxes, it's about 230 because you have 200 feet the first 2 homes and then 300 feet for the last home, the last one. And then for A2, you've got 200 for the first 2 and 300 for the subsequent. So that average is about 270. So ultimately what we're doing is it would just be 450 feet of road frontage required for any property, A1 or A2, outside of the growth area. If we'd standardize it, it would just be one option, but that's ultimately what it would look like on the street level. So then if you go to the setback section, we've got 2 different options there. Todd can speak to some of it.
Yeah.
So what Lancaster has done and what we're talking about is similar. So what Lancaster does is they have a setback minimum, but they also have a setback maximum. So what it has is homes are set essentially in a band. So they can't build any farther back. And the reason being is because if they cap how far back the property can be, even if they own the acreage in the back, it's still farmable because they can't build a home all over the place. So what we had discussed was either we have setbacks that would be a minimum of 250 feet, so homes would have to be behind that 250 feet line, or we could do it where setbacks would be no less than 200 feet, no more than 300, and there'd be a 300-foot band where homes could be. So what that would ultimately look like is what we've done is we've shown the road frontage is there, and then the depth is what would be required for a 15-acre lot. Reason why we got there, as Mr. Hicks mentioned, what we want to do is make sure that if we're going to encourage agricultural use, we want to make sure new lots being created, the new parcels as well as remnants, are large enough to be able to get land use taxation. That's something that it's workable lands. You know, Virginia Tech is the one that operates that land use taxation, and if we want something like that, we think that's a pretty easy threshold to make sure we have it. 21 acres is what's necessary for timber, and we felt that was a little bit too high for what we were trying to accomplish. But coming down to 15 acres, that's land that's workable, and it gives more options available as we move forward. But we also had 10 acres and 6 acres. 6 acres is the minimum acreage allowed for land use if you're cutting hay or something like that. So we just wanted to include that in here. And to finalize kind of what we're talking about with the setbacks, if we move forward with the recommendations with the bands, essentially this is what it would look like, and we superimposed it on this farmland to just kind of show that farmer on the top of the screen. He's the one that sold those homes along the road, so he divided it and sold it out. This is a perfect example of if that were to happen, then the homes would be located somewhere in that band, the 200 to 300 foot, if we move forward with that, and then all that land would still be usable. And of course, he could always, if multiple people wanted to buy it, just say, will you let me lease that back acreage? And if they say yes, okay, that's the one he sells it to. If no, maybe I go to the next person, but it at least gives him that option. And that's something that we talked about. The only issue that we do have is that if we change the setback requirements, that's not only going to affect new divisions, that would also affect people that may own land today that want to build. And this is where Commissioner Hicks and Commissioner Goodwin had some comments on it.
Yeah, so looking at these two different options to discuss both ways, when you're looking at that band where you see those houses in that center strip, one of the topics that came up with us was that front strip by the road and behind the house, that also being able to be usable space for well and septic. Maybe if there's certain topo reasons or whatnot that restrict that's one way to help get the houses in that area. And then you think, well, what if that doesn't work? Well, that's the point. We're slowing growth. It doesn't work. Another point behind that is Mr. Goodwin brought up a good point in our work group. Our county is surrounded by a lot of wealth. We have 3 major cities around us and just a lot of wealth coming in here. So we do have people that can buy 10-acre parcels all day long, buy 15-acre parcels all day long, and are happy to do that. And if someone wants to come to Louisa County and they say, I don't want to be in that band, I can afford a half-a-mile driveway, a quarter-mile driveway, because I want that privacy and I want to feel like I'm in a rural area. It's hard to say no to somebody that wants to come in and complement your county and build a nice place and enjoy the privacy that we provide. But on the argument of hand from that is we are taking away from forestry. We are taking away from agricultural in that process. So, that's a big reason why we put these 2 options up here, is to discuss the pros and cons of both ways and which way we're directing. Are we talking about this farmer? Are we talking about forestal? They're both good options, and they are both tools that slow the growth. And it's whichever direction we want to unify together and decide on. But either way, the front setbacks on both of these options that Mr. Kuhn has is absolutely preserving the rural character when you ride down the roadside. So that's one major win of both options. And I think we have good discussion points on the other ways. Maybe we need to hear a forestal opinion, an ag opinion, and so forth, so that we can put that out for public knowledge. But thank you, Chris. That was Mr. Kuhn, that was really good.
So before we move away from this, just a question. Assuming you would have a front setback and a rear setback, and the land behind the rear setback is open. Now, this is for building a house. Suppose someone wanted to build an outbuilding. Would you be able to build an outbuilding in the land behind that's beyond the rear setback? Or is that those setbacks for all structures on the property regardless?
It could be either or, and I think it depends on which direction we're going. If we're going for a forestal approach, or are we going for an agricultural approach? Agricultural, I would say, no, don't go past it, because then you're taking away from that farmer. But in a forestal standpoint, if you're tucking an outbuilding in the woods past that band, I don't see it affecting that nature. It's hard to find that complement in between.
Well,
And just point of clarification, we also discussed that once you get to a certain acreage, there may not be these requirements, because if you're on 80 acres working the land, it may be different than if you're on what may be the minimum lot size in A1 and A2 moving forward. So that's part of the conversation, is that there may need to be some different requirements or allowances if they get past a certain acreage.
So, but just to follow up, if I want to buy a 15-acre lot, and what I want to do in the back is because what your example, we'll set aside forestal. Your agricultural example is all tillage here. So what if I want to put a barn back there and have some animals?
And that was Commissioner Goodwin's good point, was people who do want to use that back parcel for many great reasons. It's extremely hard to tell that person no, because that's a great reason. So we thought it was a good discussion point to go between this or just doing a standard 250 setback off the road, and what we're trying to achieve out of it. So,
And this is one where, just to remind Planning Commission, what we were tasked with doing was trying to strike a balance between slowing residential growth while maintaining housing opportunities, preserving rural character while supporting working lands, and then also recognizing that long-term tax stability for residents requires some growth to occur, but we want to make sure it's done in a more manageable and planned way. So with this, I think we're doing our best effort to say, in the band, if we set it back 200 feet from the road, I think you're going to maintain that rural view shed. It's not going to be homes right up on the road as you're driving down. You're going to feel like you have a little bit more room to breathe as you're driving down the road. If you let them, if you let homes come to where, one is behind the 15-acre lot at the blue, one is between the, back black line and the bottom of the 15-acre. Well, now you start getting to the point, once the homes are there, that plot's no longer usable, because now you got homes everywhere. It's just not going to be workable when the homes are all over the place. So if we want to make sure that we try and encourage the agricultural use, that's something we just need to take into account, that if homes are going to be built anywhere on the property, it could have a detrimental effect. And I know there's people that have said, if you just increase minimum lot size and don't really do anything else, it can eat up farms faster. That's a true statement. And how some localities have done it is, essentially you go look at Lancaster, it's 50 to 200 feet. There's not very many homes that are 200 feet off the roadway. That's just not something that they do. So that's something we're trying to balance, the setbacks from the minimum to maximum, but it just, whatever's the priority.
I understand about the homes, and the question was not the residents. The question was outbuildings. And when you look at, if I want to buy a 15-acre lot, fine, I build my home where I build it there. But if I want to do, something like animals, and I want to put a barn in the back and have some pasture back there, and
I wouldn't see why that'd be an issue.
but
I mean,
that would-
ultimately,
so the question was, what kind of structures can you put back? Can you put any structures? Or
I would say agricultural structures, more than likely, ag exempt structures in the building code. Because if the whole purpose of this is to give that farmer options, we haven't really gotten into the TDR, PDR programs as an option, as an alternative to divisions. But this is one, if they get to the point where they do the division, this may be one where they can potentially, it's not saving it, because of course someone else would still own it, but it would give them the opportunity to try and lease that land back to
Sure.
continue to work it.
Yeah.
So, and that's where, if the individual wanted to utilize the land, it is their land, but
just
trying to give that,
Just a
yeah.
clarification on the types of structures you could put outside of the band, that's all.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, all
Mr.
right.
Chair.
Mr. Quarles.
don't you open yourself up to, again, we see barns that people having weddings out of. Electricity and all the amenities at home.
With the CUP. So they come through planning commission and the board of supervisors for that.
Okay. But still, how do you differentiate between agricultural and a home? Because some of these barns are very nice. So,
I mean, the building code has standards for agriculture exempt structures versus single-family dwellings. I mean, those are two completely different things in the building code.
that far apart?
Yeah. I mean, they're exempt from building code if they're used for ag purposes. So there's no inspections or things like that. So, I mean, a home is a lot more stringent than pole barn or something like that.
I understand.
Uh,
Okay.
And that question you may be referring to like ADUs, where that's kind of a mix between here's my SFD, here's my home, my barn, my ag is in the back, but you know I have this in the middle. That's Chris. What do you recommend on that? Sorry, Mr. King.
I mean, yeah, I think if there's an intent for if this is the route we wanted to go, I think if there's going to be a residential use, normally an ADU would be something like a garage with livable apartment upstairs, or
50% square footage of the SFD is the requirement, I
and it's
believe.
got to be attached to the, no, it doesn't have
It
to
can
be
be
attached.
detached, just 50% or less of the
So-
main,
It would have to be in the band if it.
because that's a
dwelling
livable
space.
structure.
Yeah, living.
Because I mean, then you think about it, there's electricity, well, septic. I mean, they're going to have all that stuff. So I don't know if they're. But yeah, I mean, that's part of the discussion that we had. Do we want to keep the ban building setback to no less than 200, no more than 300? Do we just want to set a setback of X? Right now, 50 feet is the minimum amount of setback you can get, somewhere 50 to 60, depending on where you live and where the property is. If we just wanted to, put it at 100 feet setback, double what it is, get them a little bit farther off the road and anything behind that. But yeah, that's one that we didn't know which way to go, but we wanted to bring that to you all.
Personally, I like the idea of the band. I think there's benefit in that.
One thing the ban does achieve is, in today's market, small farming is very popular. People love having chickens and selling their eggs, and, farmers markets have come up as a topic multiple times, and that does allow the availability of a small farm within that minimum parcel. Small farm can take away from a large farm, so always looking at it both ways, but it's definitely a great discussion topic between the two. And I don't believe that either one of these topics is incorrect or wrong. Like we said, we think they're both achieving preserving the rural character. It's farm and agricultural side to consider behind it. So I liked the bands as well, to compliment.
One thing I did skip over, but this will help show it, is we do have right now a lot configuration requirement. We've got on here recommendation 40 to 95% depth to width ratio. So if you look at the width of 450 feet of road frontage requirement, then you end up only being able to go back a certain level. So this would be one where if we didn't want to set an exact minimum lot size per se, but we want to make sure that they were square rectangular lots, that you would want that ratio somewhere between 40 to 95. Of course, 100%, you got a perfect square. If you get 50, you get a rectangle. So it would look more like the 10-acre lot at about 50, not exactly, but it's about 46% the ratio for a 10-acre lot. And that's just one that if we didn't want to go through the minimum lot size, but we wanted to still account for not having those really weird, irregularly shaped lots or flag lots or something like that, that there's a ratio. Right now we have 20%, so we were talking about increasing that. However, I do think that if we stick with the minimum lot size, 15 to 10 acres, something like that, we may not need the ratio, because if they meet the 450 feet road frontage, the depth, there's only going to be so much that they'd be able to do to meet that 10 acres. So that's just part of the consideration to discuss. We also had access standards. I know we've talked about it last time. Eliminating the private lane subdivisions. That's something that we've talked about, hasn't really gotten too much comment, but these are lots that more often than not should probably be one lot, but they're utilizing the private lane to end up having a front and a back lot, and then we're getting more lots and, you know, more driveways, more mailboxes right on the road where, you know, people are starting to, I'm not gonna say come to their senses, but they're starting to realize the benefit of utilizing that, and we're getting a whole lot more of them. We had more this year than the past decade, right? Yeah, so the last 2 years, we've had more in the past decade, so this is something that people are really utilizing, and later on down the road, we end up start having problems when people, you know, dealing with making improvements to that driveway or adding gravel, and now you got neighbor disputes, and they want us to step in. But that's something that we said we wanted to eliminate that private lane. And then one thing that we've talked about that we do need the attorneys to review, but we've, you know, we had a decent amount of conversation about it, is actually division timing controls. So if we were to look at doing phased divisions, to where if someone did a division, they had to wait 2 years from recordation before they could do another one. The thought process behind that is individuals want to come here, purchase land, divide it as fast as possible, sell it off, and get out of Dodge as fast as they can. This would honestly help individuals that have lived here longer, that are more here for the long term, that yes, it might take a little while to, you know, have to wait a year or two before you make that second or third division, but we think we would see a reduction in speculative people just coming in, making the divisions, selling them and leaving. But like we said, that's something that we'd have to evaluate. I think it's something that, based on the fact that we've been one of the fastest growing counties for over a decade now, that there's some provisions that we can utilize because we are starting to outpace our infrastructure and our services. So it's something that we might be able to utilize for a short term until we bring that fastest growing county, or one of the fastest growing county monikers down, and then we might have to address that. But that's just one we wanted to bring up as point of discussion if you all were interested or not in that. And then the last item that we did have regarding family division standards, we don't plan on changing anything about the lot sizes or how they access the family divisions or anything like that, but there has been conversations about people are starting to circumvent. They purchase it, they hold it for 5 years, and then they sell it with no real intent to have any you know, members of their family live there, develop it, or come forward. So what we were looking at doing is trying to do something where we required a minimum hold of 2 to 3 year period after division, but we also had a sliding scale where that retention period would essentially be 12 years minus the years of ownership. So if we've had members of the family or members of the community that have been here for 10 years, 12 years, whatever, they could do a family division, and then anyone that they could do a family division to would have to hold it for 2 to 3 years, but then they'd be able to sell it. So those people in the community that have been here for a long time would be able to get a little bit more benefit than someone that purchases it and immediately does the family division. Then that hold period or retention period would need to be 15 years. So that's something that we were trying to do, a sliding scale to try and benefit people who've been here longer than people that just come here.
Let me just ask one question here that I've always been curious about from an implementation standpoint with the family subdivisions. So I think one of the statements in family subdivision ordinance right now says that family subdivision ordinance can't be used to work around, to circumvent, that's the word I'm after, thank you, to circumvent regular subdivision ordinances. So if we make these changes, as you're, just say we did what's depicted up here with the setbacks and the road frontage and that sort of thing. So this would all be required for each, and the private lane deletion, we just throw it all in the bucket for the moment. So if we put all those in place, any family subdivision would have to meet each one of those requirements as well. Is that correct?
No,
No.
we're not
Even
changing
though-
the requirements of family divisions.
I
meaning that-
understand, but it's the statement in family subdivision that says you can't use a family subdivision to circumvent subdivision ordinances. Now, if we're changing are we changing subdivision ordinances here? I'm trying to clarify the phrasing, the wording here.
In relation to which items?
Just,
Minimum
just,
lots- minimum
I'm
lot
just
size
saying,
is a-
suppose we were to put all of these things in place. Whatever things we were to put in place, would they also apply to family subdivision? So if I come in with a family subdivision, would I have to meet these requirements because they're part of the subdivision? So I can, if I buy land for family subdivision and hold it, I could cut it up any way I want to, and you put a house anywhere you want to, and you're done, no matter what we do with this.
Well, the
I'm
minimum.
trying to clarify.
Yeah, no, so the minimum lot size for a family division right now is 1.5 acres. That would remain. The access to the property, it's not a private lane, essentially it can just be a driveway or an easement, that would remain the same. The only one of these discussions that really could affect it would be requiring the single-family dwellings in that band, the 200 to 300 feet.
Yeah.
So the setback from the road is probably the only one that would really affect, because even the 400-foot road frontage, it's not necessary for a family division.
And currently, family subdivisions have different setbacks than, if they're off of an easement or right of way, than a regular parcel.
Okay.
So unless that were to change, that may not affect
I
it
see.
as well, unless it had road frontage.
So,
Okay, thank you. Just trying to clarify that in my head.
And most of these changes are actually like zoning, changes to the zoning part of the land development regulations, not necessarily the
Subdivision
subdivision
requirements. Very good.
requirements, so,
Okay,
yeah.
I understand.
It's this way. Just a
Mr.
question.
Barlow.
Clarification, the family division is exempt from subdivision, but not zoning. So if you pass this, then in A1 zone or A2, with a 450-foot road frontage, the family division would also have to have a 450-foot road frontage, correct? Unless it's in, well, I take that back. If it's out of the growth area, just in the normal A2 zone. So family division, like I say, is exempt from subdivision, but not zoning. So if you make the 450-foot road frontage, then that, I would think, applies to family division as well.
So right now, the road frontage requirements in zoning don't apply to family subdivisions because our family subdivision regulations are based on the state code requirements, which allows family subdivisions to be accessed off of a right-of-way. So zoning requirements apply as far as minimum lot size, setbacks, and that sort of thing, except for frontage requirements because the state code specifically says they can be accessed off of a right-of-way or easement.
So it doesn't, the frontage requirements do not apply.
That was something we spent a lot of time on because we were really conscientious to make sure that those that were using these family divisions in the right intent to grow generationally in the county, that this did not restrict them. You know, we really wanted to protect families of Louisa from still being able to use a family division in the correct way. What we're trying to prevent is, you can go on Zillow right now, look in our district, and you'll see lots listed for sale, and the 7th one is listed with family division rights. So immediately that A2 parcel turns into 10 or however many they can get with the family. And that's what Mr. Kuhn and staff has this added in there for the retention period, strictly to minimize the investors coming in for short-term gains. if they're gonna use these family division rights that we're gonna keep in place as is, they have to hold it for a number of years, and chances are, if they have to hold it for a number of years, they're gonna go invest somewhere else.
Well, you remember not too many years ago, we had a 10-year hold period,
I remember.
and that got changed to a 5-year period. And it completely, you talk about circumvention, then all of a sudden 5 years is not that long. So a whole lot of them were bought and held for 5 years, and then sold. Whereas that 10-year period did its job. And that was, in other words, I mean, we do these regularly. And when I was doing them at 10 years, there was virtually no circumvention because, and when that rule changed, I had clients, okay, we've changed it to 5 years. What can I do to hold it? I'm gonna give this lot to my son or daughter. What can I do for them to hold it, to make sure they hold it for 10 years? They didn't want to back up. Some of which even put a deed of trust on the land. And then found out that didn't work because as soon as the lender was going to lend money on the house, they wouldn't take it with the deed of trust.
Right.
But people weren't upset about that length of time except for the ones that were going to circumvent the ordinance anyway.
Exactly.
So, this is ultimately step one. As you all can see, we have a couple other options in there, depending on how we move forward. There was some conversation about if you increase minimum lot size or road frontage, then you could be effectively taking division rights away. That's where potentially the TDR program comes into play, allowing these individuals that may have 3 to 7 division rights today, but if we change these standards, they may have less in the future. What we're looking at doing there, it's in that packet, but ultimately they'd be able to send their division rights or development rights, we would use it interchangeably, to the growth areas. And what the hope is that in the growth areas, that's where you may see more duplexes, apartments, condos, townhomes, something with a little bit more density where there's better infrastructure to handle it. And that should also help address the affordability issue, because whenever you have more units with a lower infrastructure costs, you normally have lower options, which would increase the housing opportunities. So that's where, we want to look at utilizing that to make sure that anybody that would lose those potential division rights, they would have an opportunity to sell them in an open market system. Then we've also got tentative plans for the PDR program, which would also be an alternative to divisions, where we're looking at that. Maggie's kind of gone over that with you all and described that. And, Ag Forestry District and individuals would sign up for a 10-year, 15-year payment. And we're still working out some of the structures and details on that, but that's another opportunity that ultimately would lower the tax burden for individuals that had it. I'm not going to say it would prevent someone from wanting to subdivide, because I don't think that the funding is going to be as substantial as what some of these lots are going for today, but it is an alternative for them for, at least a 10-year period. And then we'd also want to encourage and help enable any conservation easements that individuals may want to get and offer programs to help assist with that. And like I said, that's part of, as we go through the zoning process, as well as these preservation programs. And then we want to look at the growth areas to potentially allow for some increased density with the purchase of TDRs. But that's something we can also look at. If someone comes with a PUD or a CUP for a higher density residential development, that's something they can help mitigate their impact, where if they purchase TDRs, you're taking development rights and new homes away from outside of the growth area and putting them in the growth area where we would expect them to be. So that's something where, like we said, it's a holistic approach. We're trying to do our best to balance everything from slowing growth maintaining the rural nature of the county, making sure farmers have, or really producers of any kind, have options that's not just division if they need it, and then making sure that for the affordability piece, we try and focus the growth where it should be, which is in the growth area which has the infrastructure. So that's about all we have, and I think really some of your thoughts about which way we want to go regarding the setbacks, and if there's anything that stands out here as being too much or want to look at alternatives would be helpful, so we can try and work on that and provide any more information that y'all would like.
And just to lightly reiterate, this is step one. It's being discussed, and we're gonna work through it. And it's not being sent right away to the board, right? We're gonna implement these steps in, culminate it as a package, and send it to them as a total vision, step 1, 2, 3, 4, all as one, as we culminate it together in a grand plan versus one to their docket every month or two.
Yeah, instead of trying to build the bike while we're riding it, we get it all together at once, and then we can take it.
Any comments from any of the commissioners?
I appreciate and applaud the work that's gone into this study. And I think there's a lot of good information. But when you think about changing the landowner's rights verbally in the middle of the game, we might want to look at things a little closer to make sure that we're not taking rights, because that may end up a jagged sword with things going like they are in our economy. It puts people on edge, especially against government. So we look at these things and let's weigh it out before we make a hasty decision. That's my comment.
If this was to be implemented, would this just be on new properties, or would it be on something that I have ownership of? Would I fall into these guidelines?
So it would be the newly created parcels, that would be on new parcels, but if we had 15-acre minimums, for example, if it was for new parcels and remnant pieces, if you were on like 20 acres, then you wouldn't be able to divide because you wouldn't have 15 and 15. Where if it was 20 and it was 10-acre minimums, then you could, but that's where we want to come on the back end with those TDR program to help make sure that individuals aren't having them necessarily taken away. We're just providing them additional options.
I feel with the scenario that you've depicted here in this picture, if that farmer's in that position where he's dividing his property and selling it, I mean, I just don't feel like if he's at that point that you're going to try to lease it back to till it for row crops, hay or whatever. What would that look like in a forested area? Would it look the same?
I think so. It would be, and then it would just depend on the rest of the property. That depending on if it could still be utilized for that. And that's the whole thing. Like when we look at it, what we're trying to do is provide as many options as possible. So what individual farmers do or what individuals want to utilize it as, that would be up to them. You may be right. They may not want to lease it back. It may not be something they're interested in. But if we're going down this path, we want to at least discuss it, that this is what we're trying to take into consideration and make sure those options are available.
That 10-acre parcel there in the middle, say that the that's the only place that property would perk, or the terrain dictates that you can't build a house there, lowland, swampy, what comes of that 10-acre parcel if you can't build in that setback?
The same thing that would happen in a parcel that can't be built on today. It would just be 10 acres.
Rural character. Can I?
So if that's completely forested, what's the benefit of not allowing that person with the 15 acres to build towards the rear of his lot? I'm just,
I'm sorry, I don't understand. What now?
well, I see what you're attempting here with the ag section, that the farmer could potentially still till that soil. But if you're in a completely wooded area there, what benefit would you have at that point?
I mean, if the owner sold it and reserved the right to make at least one additional cut, then the owner would be able to make that last cut. So there'd be 30, well, not full 30, but, you'd assume if you calculate that up behind the black line, there could be 30, 40 acres of trees still there that if they reserve the right to at least cut that one more time, they could still get that. And that's what I said, that's where the options come into play. It's, there's going to be a lot of situations that individuals may not want to utilize that, but we just wanted to make sure that it's part of the conversation and the options are available. And it may not be what's best, this may not be what you guys recommend, but, this is just what we're trying to work through. I mean, that's why we came in, literally, it's either we increase the minimum setback to 250 feet from the public right-of-way and they can just build anything behind that, or we do like a band where it's no less than 200, no more than 300. And that's why we came up with both of them, is just because we don't disagree with either one. We think both are good options. It's just up to Planning Commission and the board what they think is the better decision moving forward.
And I really love what Commissioner Quarles said. It was something that we said in our work sessions over and over again, and it was something that's dear to our heart. It's hard to talk about. Because everybody that this affects it's all of our friends, all of our family, all our constituents throughout the county. This is, as I stated, the non-attractive part of our grand plan. And this is the part where we are taking something of value from somebody, and that's heartbreaking. So we've been, as a county, putting steps in place to make sure that we're giving them something of value back. Step one was a small step in the 15% tax reduction. So they've been apparent that that's something that's going to continue and continue to grow. And two other incentives that we are looking at that, to be clear, are not in existence right now, but we are working on is, one initiation is incentivizing these AFDs to come. That could be a tremendous value to the farmers that voluntarily participate in these programs. And third, and most important, is the TDR and PDR programs that we're going to work on to come. So this is taking value in some situations, in many situations, but we are giving value back in many ways as well. We're trying very hard to look at it, but this focus looks at the zoning of it, and that is the aspect of it that does do that. So it's something we put a lot of thought into, and it's part of preserving rural character and slowing growth. It comes hand in hand with this plan. So I hope it's received well. I hope it's received in kindness and its intent. But you are very much right, Mr. Quarles. It is taking something of value, and we're working on the programs behind it to bring that value back to them the best we can.
And just to reiterate, that's also why we would plan on bringing it all together. as one whole package, opposed to doing this and then slowly working on something else and then coming forward with that and slowly working. So it's all together. So this is the whole package we're talking about instead of one at a time.
I think it's very good work to begin with. And I'm sorry, Mr. Barlow.
Just, I think, right there, and I've heard it a couple of times, but that's the best thing I've heard out of all of the discussion is, and that's something that I had talked about earlier. You know, we have Ms. Beckfield and we have the Ag Forestal Committee that we formed. And I think we can really come up with something good if you have a holistic approach. But what I was afraid of, we were going to do a knee-jerk thing and try to do zoning issues that just stop things dead in their tracks, and then you don't have the follow-up to make these things work together. And with the, I think we certainly had the right intent when we started and formed the committee. We hired a person that's her expertise, is to try and bring these farms, to bring the, kind of incentivize the rural character of the farming and forest and stuff like that. But I do think what I would really like to see is what Mr. Coons just said, a holistic approach to this thing that sort of brings it all and not do it piecemeal, because when we've done that in the past, and I'm not talking about the planning commission, I'm talking about the board and my time on the planning commission, you fix one thing and shoot yourself in the foot on the next. I mean, it's easy to do. So I think this is a great start. There's a lot of things to be looked at. But if bringing it, to try and make it mesh and bring a whole package, to me, that is the way to do it. And that's certainly what I'm hoping to see.
And just the reason why we wanted to come with these individual steps is just because it is going to be such a large, complex interconnection of how it all works out. We just wanted to make sure we can talk about this piece, and we can come talk about the next piece. And then once we've kind of vetted everything out and we're in general consensus with how it's all going to work and how it's all going to interconnect, now we just have more opportunity to talk about it, more opportunity to show where, pieces connect or where they don't, where we want to address it. And then as we take it to the board as one holistic package, then at least Planning Commission has had a good long while to review it, make recommendations, look at different things as different items come up. And, when we start adding stuff to it, now there may be different ideas or thoughts come out.
Right. As I was saying, I think you've done a really good job on step one here. A lot of the work, just from your request for feedback, on the setbacks. Personally, I don't have a preference right now on the setbacks. I haven't thought through one or the other enough. I can see merits to both of them. The phase divisions, I think that's a really good concept. The timing on that, I like your time frame consideration, 2 to 5 years. I've wrestled with this a little bit as to which makes more sense in my head, and I haven't come to a conclusion yet on the longer or shorter end of it, but I wouldn't go less than 2 years, certainly. So I'm still thinking about that one. And I think with what I see you're doing with family subdivisions now, or family divisions, I think that's, personally, I think that's fine. The adding or having the minimum hold period on the back end, I mean, it's 5 years now, but I understand if you go to a sliding scale, you could reduce that. Personally, I was never in favor of changing the 10-year hold period. I thought the 10-year hold period was the proper thing to do, and that was well, let's just say I didn't agree with that and still don't agree with it. So I do think there needs to be some hold period on the back end, no matter how long the property's been in the family. There needs to be some hold period on the back end. So, and that generally doesn't punish people who are using the property properly for a family subdivision. If you're following the intent, that hold period is not an issue. And there are things built into the ordinance that allow you to dispose of that property if you absolutely have to. Legal issues that come up, and that was glossed over, I think, when the change was made from 10 years to 5 years. So that should not be an issue. If you're really using this for the intended purpose, that, you've got kids and they want to live on the place, a hold period is not an issue. So I think you're going down the right path with some of this. I don't know if I've provided you much information. I know you were looking for, I don't know how the other commissioners felt, but I felt like we ought to give you a little something, towards what you've been working towards. But
I'll at least,
as a large piece, I think it's really good, the direction it's heading in.
I'll make sure that we look at the division timing control and verify like I said, the requirements. I think with us being a high growth locality, there's certain stipulations that we can utilize. But yeah, I'll look into that and see what our options are with that.
Yeah, I don't know how any of the other commissioners feel, but I wanted to give you my input on that as well. So just push it down on top of it.
Sorry.
Any other comments from Mr.
Just,
Barlow?
just a request. I was trying to follow along with your PowerPoint, which that's great, but I didn't download that anywhere or see it where I could download it. Can you email that to me?
Yes.
And I don't know if anybody else wants it, but I think it would be helpful so that we can follow. I was trying to follow along with what you were trying to present to us, and it's not in this.
I tried to, in having some discussions, there were questions about what it would look like on an actual piece of property. So that's where I wanted to make sure that we had visual images. So I can email these images, and then I'll just summarize what each one are. So I can send it to the group.
I think that'd be helpful to me anyway.
All right. There's no other commentary from the commissioners. I do want to observe a few minutes break between the meetings so we be fresh and ready for the next one. So, in that case, thank you all so much for this, and we are adjourned.